This is just about the last time this should happen. The cost of living is really impacting, and part of the problem is that these taxes are put on by politicians who don't fill up their own cars or who ride bicycles in North London. A total lack of understanding, particularly for those that need their cars, their vans for work. And while we're at it, how are we going to pay? How are we going to pay for not increasing taxes? Well, we're going to get rid of lunatic green levies. In particular, I'm thinking about heat pump subsidies. I could take you to Jenrick in my constituency, where a couple of million quid of public money was spent putting heat pumps on houses on the front that are wooden constructs, and you know what? The heat pumps don't work at all. The same will apply to any levies, any subsidies going towards EVs. And while we're at it, the Energy Profits Levy, even the Financial Times today suggesting that if that was removed, an extra $50 billion worth of investment would go into the North Sea, with all of the jobs that go with it. And when the government argue that, well, it wouldn't make any difference if we produced our own oil and gas in Britain, oh yes it would. Those companies would employ people, those companies would pay tax, and whilst oil may be a global market, gas is not. Gas is not. And I met over the weekend, with the US administration, particularly in the energy sector, and they were explaining to me that even within America, gas prices change. So there are massive opportunities here, and yet the country is down to 2 days' supply of gas. If we get a windless April, the lights could go out in large parts of Britain. So whichever way you look at this, all the way through, from taxing the motorist, from taxing the commercial vehicle, through to being self-sufficient as much as we can in oil and gas, the idiotic policies started by the Conservatives are now being made even worse by Ed Miliband and Rachel Reeves, are hurting ordinary people. Rob?
Yeah, well, Nigel, we're here in Derbyshire to send a very strong message to Rachel Reeves that we want her to postpone, to cancel the increase in fuel duty that she has planned for later this year. I've asked her twice now in the House of Commons in the last week, and she has refused to do that. People are hard up across the country at the moment. They see the cost of groceries in the supermarkets going up, their energy bills going through the roof, and the cost of filling up at the pump getting higher and higher. They were going to be feeling that before the war. They're sadly going to feel it after the war. This is the worst possible moment for Rachel Reeves to be hiking fuel duty. So what we're saying is we're going to fight it every step of the way. We're going to put as much pressure as we possibly can on her to U-turn, and for this to be the 18th.
Well, they're quite good at U-turning, aren't they? So you never know.
And if she doesn't do it, we're being very clear that if there's a reform government, our first budget will bring down the cost of fuel by taking at least 5p off the cost of fuel every time you fill up. And just to underline the point that Nigel made, we were very clear a few weeks ago that we're going to be careful with your money. We're not going to say that we're going to reduce taxes without explaining where it's going to come from. And so today we're announcing £13 billion of savings from Ed Miliband's department, scrapping a lot of the net zero madness that is impoverishing people, deindustrialising our country right now. 3 things in particular. We're going to get rid of the grants for heat pumps. They're 3 times more expensive than a normal boiler. They're more expensive to run. They're not popular. They're £7,500 of grants. And would you believe it? More than half of the grants are going to households that earn more than £52,000 a year. So some of the lowest earning people in the country are paying for better off people to have them. Secondly, we're going to get rid of the billions of pounds that Ed Miliband wants to spend on carbon capture and storage. Remember, we're only 0.8% of the world's emissions, and this technology, which is unproven, may not even work, is going to take out 1% of 0.8%. And that will save us tens of billions of pounds in the years ahead. And lastly, we're announcing today that we're going to scrap the grant that goes for new electric vehicles. We're not going to ban people from buying petrol and diesel cars. You can buy whatever car you want under a reform government, and we're going to save billions of pounds by doing that. And all of that money is going to help us to manage the public finances more responsibly and bring down people's bills and cut their taxes. This is just the beginning of the work that we're going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead to bear down on the cost of living, to lighten the load on people across the country who are finding life incredibly difficult at the moment. Reform is on your side, and a reform government is going to bring down your bills.
Yeah. Yep, and thank you to our host today. Cheapest fuel in the country. Come on, roll up, roll up. Well done, Rob.
Well done.
So we'll do a huddle over there. What's the photograph?
Doesn't seem to be many people there.
So that is a reform, and I'm in press conference at a petrol station, unusual place. But, of course, they're making the point that Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, refused in her spring statement last week, I'm not sure you can in a spring statement, rule out the rise from the budget in stamp duty, which is coming in April and September. Panel are here, my sparring partner from the podcast, Kevin Maguire, René Honda-Camp. Maguire, the Tories are on this as well today. They're trying to force a vote in the Commons on fuel duty. Did she miss a trick last week, the Chancellor?
Possibly. She should have said, we'll wait and see what happens. But
didn't even say that, though, did she?
But if prices soar, then we won't go ahead with taking that 5p emergency COVID cut in fuel duty away. But, of course, that's what would happen in reality if prices do soar. You've got to hope the war's going to end.
But if that happens, she'll look like she's reacting to reform and the Tories as opposed to being on the front foot last week.
Yeah, and we know Labour used to do this to the Tories. If you're in power and you're the Chancellor, your sums have to add up.
Yeah.
You don't just want to keep responding and saying, yeah, I'll cut that, I'll cut that, I'll cut that. That's why she does it.
We'll come to you in a minute, René, but we're just going to bring in Catherine Forster, our chief political correspondent, who is with us in the studio. As well as calling on the Chancellor to make her, I think Robert Jenrick said, her 16th U-turn and scrap the fuel duty rise, they also made 3 pledges there, if they were to get into government reform UK, to get rid of grants for heat pumps, which they say are mostly going to people on high incomes, to scrap carbon capture and storage, it's cost billions of pounds. We're going to go back. You'll have to hold on there for the third announcement. We are going to go back to the press conference where journalists are asking questions, and Will Godley is there.
For the UK to join the bombing, but Nigel, you said we should do all we can to support US military action. Richard Tice said reform would use the RAF to bomb Iran, and Andrew Jenkins says don't rule anything out. Keeping British people safe and secure is any government's #1 priority. But if you can't even agree a position amongst the leadership, how do you expect people to trust your national security?
Well, I tell you what, given that we can't even send a Royal Naval vessel to defend British sovereign territory and an RAF base, we certainly don't have the capability to offer anything of any value to the Americans or the Israelis. So defending the base, recognising the catastrophe that is now the Royal Navy. And by the way, President Macron is really, frankly, showing the humiliating state that we've sunk to today with his very decisive actions and his intention to help clear the Straits of Hormuz. And the other point is protecting British citizens. I think so far the government have hired 1 charter plane, and even that broke down and was 24 hours late. So yes, we should never, ever, ever have said no to the Americans using the bases, particularly Diego Garcia. And interestingly, Mauritius have been very, very clear they would not have allowed that base to be used at all. So there are differing opinions as to whether we should physically join the attacks. I, as leader, am saying to you, if we can't even defend Cyprus, let's not get ourselves involved in another foreign war.
My question then is, what is Reform's position? Because you two have said...
I've just told you what the position is. We cannot get involved directly in another foreign war. We don't have a navy. We can't even defend our own military base in Cyprus.
And just secondly, and thank you for answering that so comprehensively, you're pledging to cut fuel duty and pressing the government to do so, but you also pledged, or some of your candidates did, to cut council tax when they were trying to win elections at local level, and that's gone up. So how can anyone trust anything you say?
Wrong. Never once last year in the county campaign, including here in Derbyshire, did I ever say that we cut council.
Some of your candidates did.
No,
they haven't.
No.
They've put it up.
no, no, no. Our literature...
I'll check what the people in Kent said, because they're putting it up.
You can listen if you want to, or we can jack it in now. It's entirely up to
listening.
you. We sent out literature with national messaging, which said end net zero appropriately, stop the boats and cut taxes. That was national messaging. On individual county messaging, we said nothing of the kind. Only one party last year campaigned in the locals saying they would cut council tax, and they're called the Conservative Party. In the 3 counties they won, they've increased council tax by 4.99% in every one. In 3 of the reform-led councils, we've actually risen council tax less than the rate of inflation, which is effectively a cut, but never once. Never once. And I can assure you, I met all of our candidates. I travelled extensively around the country for a month. Never once did we promise we'd cut council tax. What we said is we'd cut expenditure, and we've made at least £300 million of savings already, and that is why our council tax rises are lower than the other parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there, it's George Roberts from the BBC in the East Midlands. Nigel Farage, you've been made supportive noises of President Trump, American actions going into this war in Iran. You've come to a place today where a third of people in this constituency rely on oil to heat their homes. The President said that rising prices are a small price to pay for victory in Iran. People here have seen prices almost double, sometimes over that, to heat their homes. So is your message to them that that's a small price to pay? And also, just to follow up, on council tax, Reform are in control here. They have just put up council tax for people in Derbyshire by pretty much the maximum amount. Lots of people have told us that they're incredibly disappointed in that, particularly when it comes to pledges on the DOGE agenda, the efficiency agenda. There may not have been explicit pledges to cut council tax, but what there was a pledge to make things more efficient in order to bring bills down. They've not seen that. So what's your message to them? Thank you.
Well, across all the different councils, some have made bigger efficiencies than others. But, you know, when you go in, you don't know exactly what you're going to inherit. And also, you know, cutting things often can't be done overnight. So my message to the people of Derbyshire would be patient. We've managed it in other counties, and we will manage it here. In terms of some of these fuel debates are fascinating. You know, at 9 o'clock yesterday morning, the price of heating oil was very different to what it was at 6 o'clock yesterday evening. You might have noticed the spot price of crude rocketed to nearly $120 a barrel, came down to $84 a barrel. If the Straits of Hormuz are cleared, I accept that's an if the Straits of Hormuz are cleared, oil will be back into the low 80s and heating oil will be similar. But I get your point. Rural Britain feels under attack. Rural Britain needs cars. Rural Britain comes to petrol stations like this and they feel they're being hit in every single way. So we've got enormous sympathy for people in that position. You know, America and Israel were going to attack Iran, whatever we said or did. I think it was a massive mistake with our major NATO ally and with a country without which we're defenceless to initially prevent the Americans from using our bases. So in that way, I absolutely wanted us to be supportive. All we've seen from the Prime Minister is dither, U-turns, not knowing where he stands. And I can only guess it's because Morgan McSweeney's gone. There's no one telling him what to do. We're very, very clear that what this has highlighted to us is 14 years of running down our armed forces to the point at which the French are sending more naval vessels than we even possess. So there are some very big lessons for us to learn as a country. Thank you very much.
I just say on heating oil, I was in the House of Commons yesterday when Rachel Reeves came to make a statement on the cost of living, and she had absolutely nothing to offer people at all. on any of these challenges. And we're here today to send a very strong message to her on one of the things that people in rural Britain definitely care about, which is the cost of filling up. In Derbyshire, it'll be parents driving long distance to send their kids to school, care workers going house to house on big distances. I even heard somebody on the radio the other day who said that she wasn't able to do her chemotherapy treatment because she was worried about the cost of filling up. Well, we want Rachel Reeves to take one good step in the right direction and say she's not going to proceed with this hike in fuel duty. If she doesn't, then we're going to take action ourselves under Reform government. And just to back up what Nigel said on councils, look, these Reform councils have only been in office for 9 or 10 months, and already Reform councils are increasing taxes less than long-established Labour and Conservative councils. So I don't think that's a bad start at all, actually. They have found savings. They are managing councils, on average, more efficiently than others elsewhere in the country, and I'm sure there'll be more to come in the years ahead.
Will Godley, GB News. If I could ask two questions, if that's OK. Firstly, to you, Mr Farage. We're here because you're tackling the cost of rising fuel prices that have been rising as a result of the war in Iran, the war that you've been very supportive of, despite the fact we saw yesterday YouGov polling suggesting the majority of Brits oppose what's happening in the Middle East. So how can the British people today really believe you when you say reforms on their side, when you're supporting a war pushing up the price of petrol? And if I could ask Mr Jenrick a question, the last time oil prices were as high as they are, Liz Truss was in government, you were in her government, and they introduced the energy price guarantee. Is that something a Reform government would introduce, or can you rule that out today?
Yeah, whether we have wars in Ukraine, whether we have the Americans and the Israelis attacking Iran, are events way beyond our control. Way beyond our control. What is within our control is to produce the oil and gas that we need in this country, not to be reliant upon it coming in from the rest of the world, not to subsidise renewables, to give us the most expensive industrial energy prices in the world, and consumers who've been paying almost a 20% premium on their annual electricity bills directly as a result of government policy, with no one telling them the truth. There are two issues here. One is the price of oil. We can't control that. What we're talking about is the duty that government puts on top. And it's gone far enough. And the stealth rises that are planned by Reeves, nearly 6p over the course of the next 8 months, we are saying, hard up Britain, cost of living crisis Britain, cannot afford it, and we're going to campaign hard from this day for the Chancellor to drop that. And you know what? We won a big victory against the government last month. We've won 4.6 million people the right to vote on May the 7th, and we'll win this battle too.
Very good. Well, look, we don't know how long this war is going to last. We want it to end as soon as possible. Nigel's been very clear on that. It is making people harder up here in our own country, and that's what matters to us. Reform is a party for working people, and our first duty and priority is to them. Look, we've given our marching orders to Rachel Reeves. She could come to Parliament, say she's not hiking fuel duty. We said scrap these green levies and taxes to make it cheaper, and do the sensible thing, end the net zero madness by stopping the ban on North Sea oil and gas. That's what she needs to tell Ed Miliband. Those are good things that she could start by doing. If we need to do more, well, let's see what happens in the future. But people can know one thing about this Reform Party. It's that we're always going to be on the side of working people, and we're going to be doing everything we can to bring their bills down in the months ahead.
One thing I will promise you, and the whole of Westminster will disagree with this, because they don't understand it. Well, to be frank, they don't understand very much. But if we fracked onshore, if we developed the North Sea properly, if we developed our own gas, we would have much cheaper gas than so-called global markets. That is a myth that you hear from Labour, Liberal Democrat, the Conservatives. They don't understand the commodity markets. As I said, I was in America at the weekend, and I learned that actually gas is much cheaper in Texas than it is in Florida. Producing our own gas would reduce everybody's electricity bills significantly.
Richard Marsden, Daily Mail. Can I ask...
Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick, former of the Tory party, at a filling station in Derbyshire.
Interesting
quite a
location
good
for a press
backdrop.
conference. I agree. More interesting than a stuffy room somewhere in Westminster.